Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of the Fireside with Founders and Leaders podcast. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Zandra Moore, who is co-founder and CEO at Panintelligence. So Panintelligence is an embedded analytics platform for SaaS vendors. So Zandra has grown up around people in the tech industry throughout her entire life and her career. She's someone who's worked her way up in various different positions, all the way through to then founding Panintelligence with her co-founder to where it is now, nearly 13 years later. She's a huge advocate for the positive growth of females and those from underprivileged backgrounds getting into the tech industry. I really enjoyed talking to Zandra in this episode, so I hope you enjoy listening to it and I hope you enjoy checking it out now. Hello, Zandra, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you. And what everyone won't know is all the tech issues that I've just gone through, which is the irony of a digital tech recruiter meant to have all the best kit just to get here. It's taken us 15 minutes for my computer to do a download and upgrade and all that sort of stuff. So a big thank you to you, Zandra, for your patience through all of that, first and foremost. So and look, thank you so much for giving up your time to talk through sort of your history and what you guys are doing over at Panintelligence as well. So we'll come on to a lot of that later, but look, first of all, if you could give us a bit of an overview. So I've given a bit of an intro already as to who you are, but a bit more of an overview in terms of your background, how you got into the tech industry, and then we'll take it from there, if that's okay.
My name is Zandra Moore. I'm the CEO of Panintelligence, and my journey started in tech with having an amazing role model at home. So my mum was one of the early vanguards in tech, albeit not a founder. She was one of the very few women in the tech industry in the north of England when things like the information superhighway was what we used to call the internet.
Wow.
And she was selling that to the banks, and she was selling servers into business for Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC as they were known at the time, and also selling what they call cloud now, but at the time was called advanced infrastructure provisioning, just that idea that you might take a box from your office and put it in another building and not be able to see it, that idea of what we call cloud today, or hosting your infrastructure somewhere else. It was amazing just how much she was trying to educate the market in what today is something we all take for granted. So I always had PCs at home and modems whirring, and we were sort of 5-10 years ahead of a lot of my peers of having tech in the home. So I was sort of brought up with it. So I just wanted to be my mum, to be honest with you, when I left education. And that's rare. So you don't really have many people, especially as a woman, that you have that kind of role model. So it never really occurred to me that tech wasn't a place for me. I naturally fell into sales as a career. My mum was also in sales. I loved the energy that she just used to come home buzzing with all the stories. She loved the tech industry. She got to travel a lot, and she had no qualifications at all. And she'd sort of been a stay-at-home mum until we went to secondary school, and then found this career that she absolutely loved and did very well in. So it was hard not to be inspired by that, really. So I just wanted to go and play in tech like she had. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, really nice to have a good it's always good to have a good role model, right? And especially if it can be your mum. I think a lot of boys and girls out there will look at their parents as a role model, but don't necessarily sort of follow through in terms of their career. And I can imagine that being so inspiring, seeing your mum in certainly what still is a male-dominated environment, but really flying through and achieving and doing all these amazing things that I'm sure that there were many naysayers out there that probably said, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that, especially at the time she was in.
They couldn't understand what she was doing. Most people in her friendship groups and her circles, trying to explain the internet to people that didn't know what the internet was. Even today, I mean, it's a mind-bending concept. But at the time, it was just people didn't think this stuff was going to stay around. It all sounded a little bit,
it's a fad.
Strange. Well, I'll just do it. It's strange, right? I mean, like having a library online and you can search for anything and I get an answer, was still such a really strange concept to people that we would be able to do that. So, yeah, I think I was very fortunate to have a role model. And even at the time, I don't think I appreciated it as a young woman. It's actually only until I got later in my career that I look back and go, what a big influence she was. Actually, at the time, she was still my mum, and I was a bit like, I'm not going to do what you do, and then did exactly what she did. As teenagers do.
Yeah. Okay. And so you as you say, you were in software was part of your sort of your blood. Ultimately, it was in your veins, so to speak, from a very early age. If that doesn't sound too weird to say. But you then worked in quite a few different roles in software sales, all sorts of different areas. I want to sort of fast forward slightly up to what was at that point sort of Simply Personnel. So that was a business that you joined, again, sort of leading a lot of their sort of software sales as part of their team. And you were part of that team, from my understanding, taking it through to a sale to Wolters Kluwer. So did that sort of seeing that process, was that something that inspired you to then go on and continue to ultimately sort of push yourself to become a founder and grow into that sort of role to want a bit more of the pie, so to speak, from what you're doing there? How did that sort of
it's a great question, and I think so interestingly, Simply Personnel was actually a spin out of another company that I'd also been involved with. So Cascade, which then before that was called ProPath Software. So it was ProPath, then Cascade, and Cascade split out and became Simply Personnel and Cascade, and Cascade got acquired by the Iris Group. And Simply Personnel was very tiny, kind of one of the very first cloud HR platforms. And at a time where you could put 1 million keywords on the end of page one on your front page of your website, and you'd come top of everything in Google, because Google can't quite work it out.
Yeah.
I think so. So when you could rank very easily by just putting all of these words on page one, back in the good old days, where actually getting leads was a lot easier when people hadn't quite worked this out. Digital agencies were not a thing. So we were sort of quite early in the generating leads through a website, selling an online platform, and we were using tools like WebEx. We're going back 15 years to do all of our online demos, so we were doing things in a very progressive way. There's an incredibly small team that all worked from home. We never had an office. So when I look at what we did 15 years ago, and actually how SaaS businesses operate today, we were 15 years ahead, really. So I look back at that, I think that was a really fascinating time. It also showed you just how fast and quickly you could grow a business in a very agile way without having all the usual trappings of a building, and not having to get on the road and see everyone. I mean, we never did a face-to-face meeting. Everything was done online.
Oh, wow.
And we were using Salesforce and, like I say, generating leads just through web forms based on having a lot of words on the front page of the website. So I wasn't a director in a statutory way in that business. I built the sales operation of the team and drove the sales in the business. I wasn't a shareholder either. And at the time, I hadn't really appreciated how much value I was creating for the owners of the business. And then obviously when we were coming up to that opportunity to sell to Wolters Kluwer, I sort of realised I'd missed out on asking that asking to have that. Actually, I just didn't have the peer group around me to challenge me and say, well, shouldn't you be having shares in this business? Okay, you're earning some good money, but surely that would be what you should be doing. I just didn't have that around me at the time. But when that exit happened, I could see that actually there's probably more I wanted for myself, and I wanted to make sure that I found that opportunity. So I had a young family then, very young family, 2 children under the age of 4, and decided to set up my own sales consultancy business to go and look for. I mean, the main objective was to go and look for another startup that I could be involved in and have some shareholding in as a sort of sales or initial kind of sales leader in that business, find some tech that I could really get behind and be a director of and be a shareholder in. It also was really useful having a young family to have that flexibility. So it's quite hard to be a sales director of a business full time on the road, and there weren't many businesses like Simply Personnel at the time. It was great that we were 100% remote, and great that we did everything online, because that really fitted around my young family. So I kind of made Simply Personnel work for me, if that makes sense. And I was able to set it up. So other businesses weren't operating in that way, but I knew a startup could, and because I'd seen how easily and how little capital you needed to kind of build a go-to-market sales engine, and remote demos were absolutely fine, and people were prepared to just place orders having just seen things online. It was that really that said to me I could probably help take that model to some startups that probably don't have the same capital and help them accelerate. So I did that, built out sort of 5 sort of portfolio customers that I worked with in the kind of non-exec, but more of a kind of advisory consultancy, role for a number of years. And that's when I stumbled across Ken, my co-founder, working inside another business with this great piece of tech, which I instantly fell in love with because it's sung to some of my my strengths and my passions around visualization of information. And being dyslexic, I find visualizing data and visualizing information so much faster to process. And he was solving that problem, but doing something quite smart with it in a way others weren't. And we got on really well. And when the opportunity came to buy the IP, I was like, this is it. This is the person I want to work with, and this is the tech where I'm going to empty my bank account and buy the IP with him, and then go on that journey. So Wolters Kluwer, the Salesforce definitely triggered that. I should have expected more here and asked for more, to go and find it. So definitely was a trigger.
Nice, and then that sort of leads quite nicely on to sort of a bit closer to where you are now then with Panintelligence. So as you mentioned, your co-founder Ken had realized that there was a massive opportunity for you to both go out and build something that was already being built, but you managed to have the opportunity to buy the IP for that sort of platform and start to grow out what is now sort of Panintelligence. So tell us a bit more about Panintelligence. What are you guys doing? What's the platform all about?
Yeah, and I want to give a mention to a guy called Mike Cripps, who was one of our other founders. He was the grown-up, kind of me.
It's always one.
It's always one grown-up. So kind of me in 2014. This is our first rodeo of really going out there and being directors and founders of a business that was more than, I mean, I had a consultancy business, but it's different, right? You're selling you and your time and other people's time. It was different. And he was a director of the business that we'd been part of, and he'd been involved in turnarounds and other startups, and it was a different sort of stage in his life, and he really wanted to support and back us, and he became, he helped us to drive that sort of management buyout that we did. And I think having him around gave us the confidence that we could do that. So he sort of retired out of the business in 2019, but was a big part of that story. And I think, sometimes you do need somebody that can go, you can do this, and that has a bit more experience alongside you, which I think was really valuable. What we do is, Panintelligence is taking data that is sat in software applications. And let's face it, we're all using lots of different software these days for lots of different reasons in business and in organizations and education, healthcare. And we collect a lot of data in these systems. It's taking that data and giving the users of that software much more self-service access, so they can kind of get to that data in a way that works for them to answer the questions they need. So we're like an in-app data insights engine. You don't know it's us. We're always white labeled and rebranded as whatever that software platform is, but we sort of sit inside that software as a way for the users of that software to be able to build their own dashboards, build their own reports, and even receive kind of predictions and nudge insights in a way that helps them to not be kind of locked out of that data experience or data decision making that sometimes is left to a team that's in a corner of a building somewhere that's called BI team, or the management information, or the analysts or the data scientists, that the ones
the
that
witchcraft team,
the secret keys to the data that only they can curate and touch the data. That actually gives power back to people that are at the front line using these systems day to day to actually make decisions that they need to make, so that they can be more effective and productive and use their time and resources more effectively. So that's what our engine does, and it sits inside software platforms. And so therefore we mainly sell our software to other software businesses to help their teams to make a rapid decision around do we build this stuff, or do we just white label somebody else's and pop it in our platform and get there faster, which is what software vendors do. But we're global, so our customers are all over the world. The SaaS vendors, by their very nature, tend to be quite global in their reach. And we've been growing that business with the management buyout in 2014. We did a Series A round in 2019, raised 4.5 million then. We did another round last year, which in quite a challenging market, we were delighted we're still able to get some more investment in. We're just moving towards break even now, which again is a strong place for a business that's relatively early stage to be at. And at the moment, our greatest sort of growth and expansion is in North America, where the majority of our sort of new business pipeline is coming from at the moment. So great journey. We're still a software business selling to software businesses. So we're still sort of 50% tech people and then 50% commercial people, really. But very simple business. It's not a consultancy model at all. It's 95% recurring revenue. It's a software company.
And as you've grown and gone through that sort of journey, how's your role within the business changed sort of on day to day? From, obviously, I'm imagining it's changed quite a lot from day one, but what sort of different evolutions have you gone through sort of personally in your sort of day to day, and having to learn new things? Because I think that's something that when you start in a business as a founder, often day one it might be 1, 2, 5 people, and the role changes as you grow, I tend to find.
Yeah, I'd liken it a bit like to parenting, which you kind of go into these things happily clueless. Ignorance is bliss, and you do learn on the job. I think most people just learn on the job in any job that you do, and I don't think that's any different to sort of as your business grows and as you sort of grow in the role of CEO. I think when I started, I was very much a sales leader still in this business, and then when our co-founder Mike sort of stepped back and knew he was going to be sort of exiting out of the business, that's when I had the opportunity to sort of step in and be CEO. Really, I'd been a kind of sales director in the business. So whilst I'm a founder, I really gone from sales director to CEO. That transition at first didn't feel that much different. We were quite a small business when that transition happened. I think we're only about 15, 20 people at the most. And the biggest transition for me was when we went out to do fundraising. So I'd never gone out to the sort of venture capital, private equity market and done a round of fundraising. That was completely new. And that process followed by then having what I'd say is a grown-up board. So you have VCs, private equity, chairmen that are there have a very different remit to when you're just sort of in charge of your own ship. And whilst we had a little bit of institutional money, it was a very small VC that we knew very well. So it was felt like friends and family, really, at the board table. But when that dynamic changes, that's when the shift towards being a CEO really moves into a direction where I think you become more of what I call as a traditional CEO. In that there's a lot of stakeholder management, a lot of being tuned into the markets and being able to feed back to a group of people that rightly are needing the information to make sure that you are delivering on your promises. Right? They back to plan and they back to business, and they need to know that you're on track, and they also need to be able to give their feedback and input to help you, and you need it, but you need to be really, really tuned into. So I think I've gone from being what felt like a startup founder of a small consultancy business to today, I think growing up into what is more of a sort of traditional CEO backed by, institutional investors. And you've got to learn on the job. Really. You do learn on the job. And I don't get it right.
It's another role.
So, it's a different job.
Yeah, very different. I think it's also really important to sort of mention all those things, because it's not for everyone. And it's a really important thing for people if they're going through that sort of startup journey and they're thinking of taking investment wherever that may come from. Certainly if you're taking it from sort of a VC and going from that place whereby you're happy-go-lucky startup founder, yes, there's loads of stress, loads of pressure, and you're trying to just get things to work. But you don't have the different sort of pressures of managing all those stakeholders who, as you say, are rightly they're literally invested in the business, so they want to know what's happening, and you've got to show them that you're doing all the right things to move in a positive way.
That's right.
So it's not always for everyone to go down that route, and it's often a route that sometimes with some businesses they should actually actively avoid, because say it's not going to be the right thing for them. But really interesting to hear the transition kind of that you've gone through with that overall.
And you're right, I don't think it's for everybody at all. I mean, it's a really, I personally find it really interesting. And I find this shift into understanding how investment can drive that kind of growth and accelerate businesses, and the different types of investors and different stages of investment, and how businesses kind of get to a particular tipping point for the next sort of tier up to add their value. Is, there is a huge amount to learn actually in that space. And then when you start to learn it, you realize the value and the contribution it brings to the brands that we all hear about have depended upon this kind of ecosystem supporting and funding founders to get to that level of scale. Without it, not many bootstrap companies would get to being the big brands we know about today. It's just not the truth of it. So if anybody's got an ambition to be, to build a multi-million, and I say hundreds of $1 million or pound business, then they've got to kind of get their head around that, I think, and learn about it quite quickly, because it's really, really almost impossible to do it without that kind of support. And that's what I'm really enjoying, is kind of getting into that and seeing that actually the potential of what it could do for our business and for us as a region, as a city. If we can build a materially significant business here, the knock-on effect, the legacy of that for the business into the community and the lives of people that live and work in our business and in our area is great. Actually, that's a really good thing to be focused on. But I do think you need capital to kind of get to that scale. So if you've got that ambition, it's worth getting your head around.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It all depends on the ambition and where you want to take it ultimately. And I'd like to touch upon something that you mentioned earlier. So you've talked about going through that sort of funding journey on sort of multiple occasions, and as you and I both know, and actually many people out there will also know, but there's a huge disparity in terms of the amount of funding that is given to female founders across the board. Of one of which you are, and I know that it's something that is very close to your heart, and rightly so, in terms of promoting positive sort of messaging around helping sort of females get into, not only get into founding, but also get into tech. But there's still this huge challenge whereby I think something like 1%, right, of female founders, or make up 1% of investment makes up female founders in the market.
That's it. So you've got it. Yeah. So 1% of all capital raised goes to female founded businesses, high growth businesses. And actually 0.1% of all funding goes to female founded businesses in the north, of which I always have this kind of,
my goodness.
I have to get beyond my kind of gender and my northern identity.
And then you've got to get out of London.
You've got to get out of London, right? So majority of investors are still in London and don't venture to the regions. So you do have a kind of double barrier if you're also, from a minority or underrepresented group that gets investment, whether that is, a BAME woman or man in the north of England. It's just so much harder. But you're right, it is a challenge, but it's about trying to look at that and work out what can we do and how do we understand what the barriers are. And there's a few. I mean, I sit on the government task force for women-led high growth task force, it is, which is looking specifically at this agenda issue. And I'm sat on it with, the chair is the CEO of Starling Bank, Anne Bowden. She's amazing. The CEO of British Business Bank, and a lot of other women, and one man actually, that are either entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, or female leaders, predominantly in the investment community and angel investment and VC community. And the themes that have come up, and this is really our follow-on from the Rose Review, the NatWest Rose Review. Alison Rose, who's the CEO of NatWest, produced a few years ago, which identified that 350 million could be added to the economy if we just unlocked the potential of women founding businesses. That how do we do that? And they identified some key areas around childcare provision, affordable childcare, accessible. But some of the areas that we're looking around is influencing the investment community, because one of the biggest reasons why we get such a small proportion of investment going into female-founded businesses is because actually most of the people that are making the decisions around those investment decisions are men. So a very, very small proportion of women are actually sit on investment committees and are involved in making the decisions. And we tend to, by human nature, invest and follow or get involved in the things that we understand, we trust, we know, and are familiar. Yeah. And I think there's a definite truth to that. But equally, women by their very nature and their networks are less likely to have peers. Just like I didn't know anybody that said to me, you should have shares in that business. Women are less likely to have people around them that would be entrepreneurs or are potential high net worths that could give them seed funding. Women have less access to those networks because they're simply not in those networks in the way that men are. So actually, they just don't have the same advice, support, networks, peers, or access to initial stage funding because there's less of those people around them talking to them about these things and encouraging them to do it. So, there's a few things that we're looking at the moment, but actually I'm really passionate about the building the networks around women, peer groups, advice, support, getting them networked together so they can lift each other up, because we're very good at putting the ladder down and supporting each other, I think, in my experience, women, but also influencing the investor community to the Invest in Women Code and a few other things to try and get the investment community to recognise that their systemic problem is having a systemic issue on the number of female founders we have. So it's a really fascinating subject, but the potential to drive real change in our economy by unlocking and getting more funding into female founded businesses is huge. And I think we need growth right now. I mean, crikey, we're the only G7 that's gone negative. The latest or something is actually declining. I'm sure that's not long term, but I think there's a really big thing here around, if this is an opportunity to unlock growth, then how do we do that? So yeah,
I agree, and I can't believe for one second. So you mentioned that the fact that women don't have the same sort of support networks, which I can completely see. Certainly even, if I think of, the groups that I'm part of, and there are very few females as part of those groups. And I can't for one second believe that women don't want to be part of them. But is it more of like, I don't know, is it just intimidating with lots of men who are just bullshit and crappy sometimes?
I don't really think it's that either. They're not, if you're a group of guys and there's 5 of you, and then you say, well, let's make it 10 and let's make it 30 or whatever, you're more likely to know other guys and invite other guys, right? The nature of our networks means that we tend to draw towards us what we have around us. And in my experience, when women set up networks, they find it really easy to fill a room of 30 people. Go, where are all the women? And then I've got a network of 1,000 women in Leeds called Lean In. And they're like, you've got 1,000 women in Leeds in your network. It's like, I have, and it's growing every single week. I mean, where are they? I said, well, kind of women like to hang out with women, a bit like men like to hang out with men. We also like to hang out together, but there is something about encouraging women to kind of come together in the spaces where they feel comfortable, whether that's mixed or not, but actually creating more of those networks for women is by absolutely, in my absolute experience, that's where you suddenly they come out of the woodwork and they go, oh yeah, I want to be part of that, because that just feels a bit more like them, and they're more likely to know people in that room or walk into that room with somebody and feel comfortable. So you're right, there's a little bit of that, but it's just human nature.
You're so right though, because I think actually if you look at the psychology behind it, you say women lean towards the people they know, and women who are like them. Same with men. Because there's so much going on in the world, and you don't want to say the wrong thing with the wrong peer group. But if you're in that comfort zone where it's a safe space, and you're like, look, we can just talk freely. There's no problem. And sometimes you might not agree with what different people say, no matter the sex, color, or creed of that person. But it doesn't feel like it's so awkward if someone says something.
But my experience, nearly every man I meet wants to see this change happen. They're not intimidated by it. They're not threatened by it. They're not saying, women have already got lots of. They don't. I mean, most men I speak to are like, how do we help? What do we do?
What do we do? Exactly.
What do we do? How do we make this? And we just go, do you know what? Sometimes actually part of this is women need to just help women to get together and you know, you can help by helping give us the space and opportunity to do that and support it, you know, be sponsors, advocates, do what you're doing. Giving me a voice on this podcast is great, right? That's my way of being able to maybe shout out into a bigger void and get other women to think about, well, just gather a few of you together. And if you start with 5, then it'll become 10, then it'll become 20. I started with 10, I've got 1,000. So, you know, they are there. Just get each other together, and people do just pull each other up. Just having someone to talk to and go, have you done this? Yes, I have. Okay, that helps. Or do you know someone? It all comes through networking. So building networks is really, really powerful. And also I'm involved in a female founders accelerator incubator, the first one of its kind in Leeds. But just seeing the way those female founders are really supporting each other. And I know they've got a relationship that will last for a very, very long time. I know that just by bringing a female founder cohort together, that will have probably a much bigger impact than the accelerator I went on. I was the only woman, and the difference is huge. It's really, really, really big. Yeah.
And what's the accelerator called? And talk to us about some of the successes it's having.
So Bruntwood SciTech, Bruntwood, a kind of property firm. Bruntwood SciTech have got a female founders incubator that's based at a platform in Leeds. They're all tech businesses, so early stage tech, like I say, very early, so more incubator than accelerator, I'd suggest. But, you know, wellness and well-being apps, things that actually find women tend to be drawn to some very ESG goal type, environmental, social projects, initiatives. So there's some quite strong well-being, health. There's also health tech and medical. There's an incredibly smart lady that's doing something with, I can't even tell you actually what it's doing, but it's so clever. She told me about it. I can't. But it, you know, not quite genome sequencing, but it didn't feel like it was far off it. To AI and you know, devices stuff. So really, but very tech, but actually they bringing a cohort like that, quite people that may not have met each other. They have so much to support each other. There's a cross-working and collaboration between those businesses is already happening, you know, starting to work together and enable each other's businesses. So but it's the first one. I think they're launching one in Manchester as well in the next few months. So really successful.
Nice. And some of my opinion on some of the reasons for some of this sort of inequality, if we call it that, within the tech space and tech world. Some of it, not all of it. I can't lay all the blame on the educational system, but it is to do with the educational system and a lot of girls in schools not necessarily knowing that they have opportunities. Certainly, I feel like from my generation, I'm sort of veering on the wrong side of 30, closer to 40 these days. But when I was sort of growing up, and the girls that were in my life at that time weren't sort of told you can go and work as a CEO in a big business, or most of them weren't. And I see that shift changing now somewhat for the better, but it's still not quite there. In my humble opinion, from everything that I see of a lot of the females out there at school, they're not given the opportunities. The doors aren't open to them as much to say, you can come into this world called technology, and actually you're able to do some really interesting things, and it's great.
Do you know, it's really fascinating. We're involved with an organisation called the Ahead Partnership at Leeds, and they help tech employers in the area get into schools and do things like green tech hacks or careers panels or speed kind of networking with kids at a particular age just before they choose their options, to try and help them to have real exposure to people in an industry so they can ask whatever questions. Now, they always ask you how much you earn and what car do you drive and that kind of stuff, and what
love kids
is for. So, you know, no matter what, they kind of like, but they do think that everybody in tech builds apps or computer games, right? They don't actually. And then when you try, and there's so little knowledge about what the tech industry is, it's very, very hard for either boys or girls, frankly, to even kind of imagine themselves in it, because they just think tech is either coding or building computer games. And the curriculum is so far out of date. I mean, we're still teaching them about, you know, ROM and RAM and, you know, specs of computers. So, you know, the education system's behind. and the careers advice is negligible, and teachers have got way too much on their plate to be able to keep a pace with all the changing industries out there that, frankly, there's no way they could keep up with what's going on in tech. I struggle to keep up with what's going on in tech, so why teachers should. So yeah, I think it is up to us as an industry to get in front of these young people and help them to see. And we do kind of girl tech events with a head partnership. We get like hundreds of girls from schools, and then we just line up all the women in tech, and we do Q&A and panels and workshops with them. And I think we have to be part of the solution as the women that are in the industry. And I think people like the head partnership are fantastic at kind of dragging us out of our businesses and going, come on, be part of the solution to the problem. And then you do see that it does change. You hear the girls saying, I never thought about this, I'm going to choose it now. And you think, God, if I can just have impact 10% of this room of 200 girls, then there's a good chance, we're going to have a pipeline impact on the future, which is what it's about, really.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. It's what needs to happen. And someone who's a recruiter in the tech industry, it's one of the biggest things that we hear from people who are hiring people into this space is we need more females especially in the core tech markets, if we're talking sort of development and things like that. But so the more we can do to attract people into it, the better. Ultimately,
role model. I had one at home.
Yeah.
Most people don't, right? Most young people don't have anybody in their home that's ever worked in tech, because it's still such a new industry, and that's the problem. And so the fact, the chances of there being a woman in your family that's worked in tech or knows anything about tech is so unlikely. So yeah, we've got to get out there. And I try and encourage all the women in our business, just like, we need you out there. I know that feels like a bit of a responsibility, but if you don't want to be, we're still 17% women in tech. It's still, stayed at 17% for something like 5 years or something.
Yeah.
It's just not changed at all. We've got to be part of the change, really.
And something else that you've been involved in is No Code Lab as well, which is helping to fix some of the problem of getting
some of the pipeline challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting one, this one. Do you know, we have a lot of fun with this one. This is a great fun project that we run. And my team love it because we reach way beyond diversity in a gender point of view. This is where we really reach into very different parts of the community that are not in digital right now. So we get people like the over 60s, refugees, ex-offenders, nurses, accountants, lawyers, you name it. Really, really people that are kind of tech curious and wonder if they want to get into tech. And we run these kind of we've got a big mega hack in May, which is be part of a conference we're running in Leeds. And there'll be like 12 teams of non-techies that are coming together. They build a basic MVP app in one day, but using no-code platforms like Bubble or our tools, no code. You don't need to be a coder to build like data analytics and insights in ours. But there's also lots of other tools out there. That's Microsoft products and Webflow, and there's loads. So we just get those technologies, and they build a basic app to solve a problem about something they care about. And they just realize that tech is something that's much more accessible, and they start to think about whether it's, and also if they don't do it for themselves, it's useful because a lot of these people are involved are, their aunties or uncles or parents or cousins or sisters or brothers, whatever it might be. If they go back into their homes and their communities and go, we did this thing and tech's this, it's very different than we thought it was, then you hope that kind of just trickles out a little bit more into different groups that are not coming into tech right now, because we have a massive pipeline problem. And retrainees are one of our best sources of talent right now. So we use North Coders and get people that have chosen to retrain as a developer or retrain as, a tester or whatever product role there might be.
Yeah.
And they've got the industry experience, they've paid to retrain, and so they come into your business just that bit more mature in their experience, the working place. They bring all of that kind of knowledge and understanding of the workplace, but actually they can apply that to this new skill that they've got. And actually retrainees are as good as any grad in my experience, and probably better in the fact that they've got some life skills, work experience, some life skills. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it definitely helps. So Zandra, I'd like to, it feels appropriate to sort of finish on one final question. And thinking about sort of all the advice you've been giving over the course of this sort of episode of the podcast, it'd be really great to get your sort of take. So if there's someone listening to this thinking, yeah, she sounds pretty cool, like what she's doing, how do I start? Like as you mentioned, you had your mum as your role model in tech. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about how they can get into the tech industry and look to take a similar path that you've taken? What advice would you give them to sort of do all of those sorts of things?
Well, the great thing about the tech industry right now is it's short of talent. So you're pushing at an open door. So if you go and talk to anybody in the recruitment industry, in the tech sector, or any of the kind of supporting ecosystems, whether it's the universities, the colleges, or wherever, there's lots and lots of organizations. You'll find there's loads and loads of different places for you to kind of get advice and support about how you could enter getting into tech. There's lots of different pathways. Just reach out to people in the industry, because we're hungry for talent and people that are passionate to be in it. So it's an open door. Just push the door, and you'll walk through it. If you want to speak to me, just find me on LinkedIn, Zandra Moore. I love LinkedIn. If people say, hey, I've listened to this podcast, I'd love to connect. If you want a quick chat and you can tell me what it is you'd like to chat about, then I'm more than happy to connect and make that happen. So, do reach out. I can't promise I can give everyone jobs, but I can definitely point people in the right direction if it's helpful. So, but yeah, it's an open door. Just push it, and anybody really in the industry, they'll just point you in the right direction.
Simple. I love it. Thank you so much, Zandra. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been super interesting talking to you, and hopefully very insightful for everyone listening. So, okay, thank you for giving up your time.
A real pleasure. Thank you so much.